March 1941. Bletchley Park, England. Rain presses softly against the windows of a temporary wooden hut that was never meant to last this long. Inside, the air smells of damp wool, ink, and cigarettes burned down to the filter. The war feels far away here, reduced to paper strips, chalkboards, and the relentless clatter of typewriter keys. Yet the Mediterranean is bleeding. British convoys are disappearing. Italian warships move like ghosts, striking and vanishing with unnerving precision. Somewhere between Sicily and Greece, men are dying because messages are being sent perfectly. She's 19 years old, too young, many think, to be trusted with anything that matters. She does not wear a uniform that commands attention, nor does she carry rank. She is one of dozens of junior codebreakers assigned to naval traffic, a task considered secondary to the glamorous hunt for German Enigma keys. The Italians, after all, are not supposed to be this dangerous. Their navy is assumed to be slow, predictable, doctrinally rigid. That assumption is already killing sailors, but assumptions die slowly in institutions built on hierarchy. The intercepted message arrives just before dawn, printed on thin paper already creased by too many hands. At first glance, it is ordinary. The same structure, the same disciplined formatting, call signs and expected positions. Rotor indicators clean and unambiguous. To the senior analysts, it is reassuring. Consistency means solvability. Order means control. But as she begins to transcribe it by hand, her pencil pauses. Something feels wrong, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a missing step on a staircase in the dark. She reads it again and again. Italian naval enigma messages follow rules so rigid they are almost comforting. Every message begins and ends in predictable ways. Courtesy phrases, padding, redundant markers designed to avoid operator error. Here, one of those markers is gone. Not scrambled, not encrypted differently. Gone entirely. The space where a letter should be is empty, yet the rest of the message flows around it as if nothing happened. It would be easy to dismiss. A transmission error. Atmospheric interference. A tired operator. In war, mistakes are common and usually meaningless. But this absence is precise, deliberate. Someone chose not to send that letter. Around her, the hut hums with quiet urgency. A kettle boils and is forgotten. A chalkboard is wiped clean and filled again. The older men debate rotor turnovers and key exhaustion, speaking with the confidence of people accustomed to being right. She does not interrupt. She has learned that interruption is expensive currency here. Instead, she returns to the message and asks a simpler question. What kind of navy removes information instead of adding noise? The answer unsettles her. A navy that knows it is being listened to. Italian naval doctrine prizes radio discipline above almost everything. Ships are trained to transmit only when necessary, to reduce chatter, to trust prearranged plans. If a fleet is moving according to a timetable already agreed upon, there is no need to state the obvious. The missing letter is not a mistake. It is a confirmation that the obvious is happening exactly as planned. She sketches possibilities on scrap paper. Fuel limitations, escort speeds, night movement windows. The Mediterranean is narrow, unforgiving, and crowded with patrol zones. There are only so many places a large fleet can go without refueling. Only so many hours it can move before daylight exposes it. By removing the letter, the Italians are not hiding their intent. They are advertising confidence. She looks up and sees that no one else is looking at this message anymore. It has been categorized, logged, and quietly deprioritized. Attention has shifted to German traffic, louder and more complex, full of mathematical seduction. This Italian message is too clean, too boring, too easy to ignore. Her chest tightens. If she is wrong, speaking up will cost her credibility she does not yet have. If she is right, silence will cost lives she will never meet. The paradox presses down on her harder than any equation. Intelligence is not about certainty. It is about responsibility. She approaches a supervisor, careful with her words, presenting not a conclusion, but a concern. The response is polite, dismissive, efficient. There is no time to chase shadows. Naval Command wants answers they can act on, not intuitions from junior staff. The war rewards decisiveness, not doubt. She returns to her desk, but the thought refuses to leave her. She reconstructs the message as if the missing letter were present, then as if it were deliberately removed. One version leads nowhere. The other leads south, toward known Italian anchorages and patrol routes, toward a convergence point that makes sense only if the fleet expects no interference. By midday, the rain has stopped. Somewhere, British ships are already at sea, unaware they are being hunted or that an opportunity is forming in the dark. In Hut 6, a 19-year-old girl holds a truth that does not yet exist officially. It lives only in the space where a letter should have been. War is often remembered as noise, explosions, orders shouted over engines. History, though, turns just as often on what is not said, on omissions that reveal more than declarations, on young minds allowed just enough access to see the cracks, but not enough authority to seal them. As the day fades, she knows the message will not change. The absence will remain. The question is whether anyone will listen before the Mediterranean answers it in blood. March 25, 1941. Hut 6, Bletchley Park. Morning light slips through the high windows at an angle that turns floating dust into constellations. The room is already alive with movement. Chairs scrape. Papers shuffle. Someone coughs into a handkerchief stiff with starch. Outside, the war remains abstract, held at bay by hedgerows and secrecy. Inside, it tightens its grip with every intercepted signal. She has not slept well. The missing letter has followed her into dreams, rearranging itself into new patterns each time she closes her eyes. Now, back at her desk, she spreads the Italian naval traffic before her again, aligning timestamps, frequencies, and call signs as if laying out pieces of a crime scene. She's no longer asking whether the absence matters. She is asking what it demands. Italian Enigma is simpler than the German variant, but that simplicity hides a ruthless efficiency. Fewer rotors, fewer settings, less room for operator error. The Italians compensate with discipline. Messages are sent sparingly. Phrases are standardized. Deviations are rare and meaningful. This is not amateur radio chatter. It is a language designed to survive interception. She begins reconstructing the message not letter by letter, but intent by intent. What would an Italian admiral assume his captains already knew? What information would be redundant if a fleet were following a prearranged operational plan? Fuel consumption rates suggest a limited radius. Escort destroyers impose speed ceilings. Night movement implies reliance on darkness over air cover. Each constraint narrows the map. Chalk dust coats her fingers as she sketches the Mediterranean coastline from memory. Taranto, Naples, Tripoli, Greek waters recently destabilized by British presence. She marks likely rendezvous points, crossing out those that violate logistics. The process is slow, almost meditative, but beneath it runs a current of urgency that makes her breath shallow. This is not theory. Ships are already moving. Around her, conversations blur into background noise. Senior analysts debate machine settings and probability curves, their confidence grounded in years of recognition and success. She does not resent them. She envies the weight their voices carry. When they speak, doors open. When she hesitates, doors remain politely closed. She takes her calculations to a colleague first, someone closer to her age, someone who understands what it is like to see something before you are allowed to name it. Together, they test the hypothesis from another angle. Time zones, message relay delays, known Italian command habits. The picture sharpens instead of dissolving. The absence is no longer empty. It is directional. By early afternoon, she makes a decision that will not be recorded anywhere. She escalates. The information moves upward through the system not as a revelation, but as a suggestion, framed carefully, buffered with caveats. Intelligence culture punishes certainty without rank. But the Admiralty has been hungry for clarity in the Mediterranean, and hunger lowers defenses. Her analysis reaches someone who understands fleets as living organisms, constrained by physics and fear. Someone who recognizes that silence can be operational. Orders are drafted quietly. British ships already in the eastern Mediterranean are instructed to adjust course. Not dramatically, not publicly, just enough to be present where presence might matter. Radar-equipped cruisers and battleships, still a novelty, are positioned to exploit the night. The sea, vast and indifferent, begins to narrow. She learns of the decision indirectly, through shift in tone, through glances exchanged over stacks of paper. No one congratulates her. No one names her contribution. The war machine does not pause to acknowledge individual insight. It absorbs and moves on. She returns to her desk, heart racing, hands trembling slightly as the implications settle in. If she is wrong, ships will sail into emptiness. If she is right, they will sail into history. As evening approaches, intercepted traffic increases. Short bursts. Confirmations. The Italian fleet is underway. Heavy units. Battleships escorted by cruisers and destroyers, moving with confidence born of routine and secrecy. They believe they are unseen. They believe darkness belongs to them. At Bletchley, night falls without ceremony. Lamps flick on. Tea is reheated. The war's tempo does not respect circadian rhythms. She stays, listening to the steady clatter of machines, translating enemy intent into English words. Each new fragment aligns with her reconstruction. The absence remains consistent. The silence holds. Somewhere far to the south, British ships cut through black water, radar screens glowing faintly in enclosed bridges. Radar is still mistrusted by some commanders, seen as experimental, unreliable. Tonight, it will become decisive. The Italian fleet, trained for daylight gunnery and visual contact, moves blind into an enemy that can see without being seen. She does not know this yet. She knows only that the logic has not broken, that no contradictory signal has arrived to undermine her conclusion. Relief mixes with dread. There is a moment in intelligence work when analysis ends and consequences begin. She has crossed it. In the early hours, reports begin to filter back in fragments, heavily classified, stripped of emotion. Contact made. Engagement initiated. Enemy vessel surprised. The language is clinical, but beneath it pulses something astonishing. The British have caught the Italians at night, at close range with radar-guided fire. The imbalance is catastrophic. She sits very still, absorbing the meaning of each word. She thinks of the missing letter again, and of how easily it could have been ignored forever. How many other absences go unnoticed because no one young enough or insecure enough is willing to stare at them long enough. By dawn, the scale of the encounter becomes clear. Multiple Italian cruisers sunk, destroyers crippled, battleships damaged beyond immediate repair. Hundreds, then thousands of sailors lost in the dark, many never firing a shot. The British losses are minimal. The engagement will be remembered as a masterpiece of naval warfare, a triumph of technology and command. Her name will not appear in the reports. It cannot. Secrecy demands anonymity. Credit flows upward, as it always does, toward admirals and systems and strategies. She understands this intellectually, but understanding does not dull the strange ache in her chest. Pride has nowhere to land. Guilt has nowhere to go. She steps outside as the sun rises over Bletchley, painting the fields gold as if the world were not at war. Birds move through hedgerows. A bicycle passes on the road. Normality persists with cruel indifference. Somewhere in the Mediterranean, the sea is littered with oil and wreckage, with men who believed silence would protect them. She wonders, briefly, whether the Italians ever realized what betrayed them, whether any of them understood that it was not a superior fleet or a louder signal, but a missing letter, noticed by someone they would never meet. War collapses distance in ways geography cannot. There is no celebration. There is work to be done. New messages arrive. New silences wait to be interpreted. She returns inside, carrying with her the knowledge that intelligence does not pull triggers, but it decides where triggers are pulled. That power is quiet, immense, and almost never thanked. As she sits back down, the paradox settles into her bones. Outsiders change wars not by shouting, but by listening harder than anyone else. And once the outcome is set in motion, the world rarely looks back to ask who noticed first. March 28, 1941. Night settles over the Mediterranean like a held breath. The sea is calm, almost deceptively so, its surface broken only by the long, dark silhouettes of ships moving in disciplined formation. The Italian fleet believes it owns this darkness. For generations, naval power has meant guns, armor, and daylight visibility. Night is supposed to be safety, a curtain drawn across uncertainty. Tonight, it becomes a trap. The Italian sailors do not know they have already been found. British warships glide without lights, their bridges dim, voices low. Radar screens glow softly, translating invisible pulses into unmistakable shapes. Contact bloom on the scopes, large ones. Capital ships, cruisers. The enemy is exactly where the analysis predicted they would be, moving exactly as silence had suggested they would move. The distance between prediction and reality collapses into a single, terrifying truth. The trap is closed. On the Italian flagship, officers peer into the darkness, straining their eyes for threats that cannot be seen. Lookouts rely on moonlight and instinct, tools that have served sailors for centuries. No alarm sound. No warning arrives. The first British salvo shatters the illusion of safety in an instant. Guns roar. The night erupts in a fire and steel. British shells slam into Italian cruisers at point-blank range, guided not by sight, but by mathematics and machines. Explosions tear through decks where sailors at seconds earlier believed themselves unseen. Ships list violently. Men are thrown into black water thick with oil and debris. Orders are shouted, but confusion spreads faster than command. The Italians try to respond, but the enemy remains invisible, firing with impossible accuracy. Gunnery crews swing turrets toward muzzle flashes that vanish as quickly as they appear. Return fire falls wide, splashing harmlessly into darkness. The imbalance is devastating, almost cruel. This is not a contest of fleets. It is an execution enabled by knowledge. Within minutes, entire ships are burning. One cruiser capsizes, taking hundreds with it. Another explodes so violently that survivors later struggle to describe the sound. Destroyers rush in to assist, only to be cut down in turn. The sea becomes a graveyard illuminated by flames. By dawn, the scale of the disaster is undeniable. 3 heavy cruisers sunk, 2 destroyers destroyed, a battleship crippled and forced to flee. 2,303 Italian sailors are dead. Many never knew who killed them. Fewer still would ever know why. The British fleet withdraws as efficiently as it arrived, leaving behind wreckage, oil slicks, and silence of a different kind. In official dispatches, the victory is described as decisive, brilliant, a triumph of command and technology. Radar is praised. Admirals are congratulated. The engagement enters naval textbooks as a turning point in maritime warfare. At Bletchley Park, the news arrives filtered, stripped of blood, and screaming. Numbers replace faces. Ships replace men. The girl reads the reports slowly, each line confirming what she already knows and revealing what she wishes she did not. Her analysis was correct. Her absence mattered, and thousands of men paid the price for that correctness. There is no celebration for her. There cannot be. The truth of how the battle was set in motion is classified, buried beneath layers of secrecy that will outlast the war itself. She returns to her routine almost immediately, because intelligence work does not pause for reflection. New messages arrive. New ciphers demand attention. The machine grinds forward, indifferent to the individuals who keep it running. Still, something has changed inside her. It is not pride. Pride requires recognition, and recognition will never come. It is not guilt, though guilt brushes against her thoughts in quiet moments. It is something heavier and more complicated. An understanding that war rewards outcomes, not insight. That history remembers explosions, not equations. that the people who tilt the world rarely appear in its photographs. The Italian sailors are mourned in their own way. Families receive notices stripped of detail. Sons and husbands are lost at sea, their deaths explained as the cost of duty. No one tells them that a missing letter helped guide British guns through the night. No one tells them that the enemy knew where to wait because someone noticed what was not said. Years pass. The war expands, contracts, ends. Secrets loosen slowly, reluctantly. Files are declassified in fragments. Names appear in footnotes, then fade again. The battle is studied, analyzed, admired. Radar is credited. Doctrine is revised. The story becomes cleaner, simpler, more comfortable. Human intuition is harder to quantify than machines, so it is quietly omitted. She grows older. Life moves on. The war becomes something people talk about in documentaries and books, framed by music and narration. Sometimes she recognizes moments that feel familiar, scenes where intelligence triumphs over brute force. She rarely sees herself reflected there. That is not bitterness. It is realism. The paradox remains unresolved. A teenage outsider, armed with nothing but attention and courage, altered the course of a naval war. Institutions absorb the benefit and erase the source. This is not unique. History is filled with such stories, with victories built on insights credited to systems instead of souls. What lingers is the lesson, uncomfortable and enduring. That silence can be louder than noise. That absence can be deadlier than misinformation. That progress often comes from those least empowered to claim it. And that the moral weight of knowledge does not disappear simply because recognition does. In a modern world, we celebrate technology, algorithms, artificial intelligence. We speak of machines that see patterns humans cannot. But the Battle of Cape Matapan was not won by radar alone. It was won because a human being noticed something small and unsettling and refused to let it go. The machine extended her sight. It did not replace her mind. The sea off Greece eventually settles. Wrecks sink deeper, becoming reefs, then memory. Names are carved into stone. Numbers are etched into history. The missing letter remains missing, invisible to anyone who does not know where to look. And that is how many wars are truly decided, not by the loudest voice or the largest gun, but by the quietest mind asking the most dangerous question. What isn't here and why? The silence holds. Somewhere far to the south, British ships cut through black water, radar screens glowing faintly in enclosed bridges. Radar is still mistrusted by some commanders, seen as experimental, unreliable. Tonight, it will become decisive. The Italian fleet, trained for daylight gunnery and visual contact, moves blind into an enemy that can see without being seen. She does not know this yet. She knows only that the logic has not broken, that no contradictory signal has arrived to undermine her conclusion. Relief mixes with dread. There is a moment in intelligence work when analysis ends and consequences begin. She has crossed it. In the early hours, reports begin to filter back in fragments, heavily classified, stripped of emotion. Contact made. Engagement initiated. Enemy vessels surprised. The language is clinical, but beneath it pulses something astonishing. The British have caught the Italians at night, at close range with radar-guided fire. The imbalance is catastrophic. She sits very still, absorbing the meaning of each word. She thinks of the missing letter again, and of how easily it could have been ignored forever. How many other absences go unnoticed because no one young enough or insecure enough is willing to stare at them long enough. By dawn, the scale of the encounter becomes clear. Multiple Italian cruisers sunk, destroyers crippled, battleships damaged beyond immediate repair. Hundreds, then thousands of sailors lost in the dark, many never firing a shot. The British losses are minimal. The engagement will be remembered as a masterpiece of naval warfare, a triumph of technology and command. Her name will not appear in the reports. It cannot. Secrecy demands anonymity. Credit flows upward, as it always does, toward admirals and systems and strategies. She understands this intellectually, but understanding does not dull the strange ache in her chest. Pride has nowhere to land. Guilt has nowhere to go. She steps outside as the sun rises over Bletchley, painting the fields gold as if the world were not at war. Birds move through hedgerows.